Hello, this is Dr. Paul Cottrell, and I am recording this on July 12th. Lindsey Graham passed away last night, so we're going to play some clips on that. But I want to kind of focus on the idea and this concept of this curse that's coming. It starts on 9/11 of this year and lasts for 2 years. The reason being because of Rosh Hashanah and the Sabbath coinciding, and the shofar cannot be blown to silence Satan or Satan. So the reason why I'm concerned about this is when you have Rosh Hashanah coinciding with the Sabbath, especially if it's for 2 consecutive years, which will be going into that type of epoch, bad things happen to the world. So I suspect that food shortages, climate issues in terms of excessive heat, excessive precipitation, war, economic issues, geopolitical problems, domestic issues, all these things are going to be coming to the fore. You can kind of sense that with Lindsey Graham passing away unexpectedly, supposedly from a brief sudden illness. Some people have said that the last 6 months or so he didn't look as energetic, but that could have been his age. He was 71. But it is a shocker. But look at it from the lens of this disorganization that's taking place with the Republican Party. And I suspect that because Trump didn't do what he was supposed to do in Iran and destroy the IRGC and the theocratic regime, that this curse that's going to be affecting everybody in the world is starting to emerge in the Senate. And there's going to be a lot of dysfunction within the legislative branch for the Republican Party. So that's the mindset that I have, and the lens that I'm looking at this. It's more of a metaphysical lens. With that, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and help support the work that I do by donating. You can donate through Stripe, PayPal, or buy me a coffee. You can be a paid member to my Patreon or Substack channel. All these videos are for free. And if you pay attention, you'll be able to improve your health and wellness and improve on how to manage your finances through these tumultuous times. What I'm saying will make you money, and what I'm saying will get you healthy. So if you just pay attention and you do what I tell you to do, you'll be fine. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nano silver lozenges. You can use them during the allergy season, the cold season, or just cleaning the house in the garage or the basement. You can get it in Manuka honey or in orange splash, fortified with vitamin C. But these are made from structural nanosilver, so it'll help to neutralize, to mitigate any throat irritation and further problems from that. It's really important to protect your oral pharynx and neutralize, and structural nanosilver lozenges do that for you. Good Night formula has tryptophan, melatonin, GABA, and passion flower to allow you to get into 3 to 5 cycles of REM sleep and deep sleep. That's super important to consolidate memory, detoxify your central nervous system, and be well rested. When you take this regularly, if you have good sleep regularly, you'll slow down the aging process and you'll have better brain function. Digestive enzyme complex, super important to reduce the load on your pancreas so you can digest your foods. Digestive enzyme complex has all the enzymes you need to break up carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. Take it before you eat and digest that food. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right. What we're going to do is we're going to play some clips about Lindsey Graham.
Senator Lindsey Graham has died at 71 years old. His office writing, quote, "On the evening of Saturday, July 11th, U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham passed away from a brief and sudden illness. Senator Graham's family appreciates prayers his time and asked for privacy during this incredibly difficult period.
At this hour, no cause of death has been revealed, but police reportedly responded to a cardiac arrest call at his home and were seen carrying a person away on a stretcher to an awaiting ambulance. Senator Graham had just returned from Ukraine, where he met with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky in Kyiv as part of his efforts to end the war with Russia.
President Trump paying tribute to the longtime senator and his close ally. He posted, quote, "Senator Lindsey Graham, one of the greatest people and senators I've ever known, is dead. He was always working and was a true American patriot. Lindsey will be greatly missed. Details and arrangements to follow. So sad."
And reactions pouring in from around the world. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu posting, quote, "Israel has lost one of its greatest friends. America has lost a patriot." Senate Majority Leader John Thune says, quote, "His influence on the federal judiciary, our national defense, and his beloved South Carolina will be felt for generations." And in his home state, fellow South Carolina Senator Tim Scott writes, "Lindsey remained committed to public service and doing what he loved. He always introduced levity and brought wit to the most challenging moments." And Governor Henry McMaster remembers him as the fiercest of fighters for South Carolina and America, and a loyal and steadfast friend.
Lindsey Graham's fight for our country started long before he was elected to the Senate, serving 6.5 years as a U.S. Air Force military prosecutor and defense attorney. Upon leaving the Air Force, he joined the South Carolina Air National Guard, serving for another 6 years before joining the U.S. Air Force Reserves, where he performed numerous short-term reserve duties in both Iraq and Afghanistan. He retired at the rank of colonel after 33 years in uniform.
The senator came from humble beginnings, being raised in central South Carolina, where he lived in a single room with his family. Graham then became the first in his family to attend college, where he lost both his mother and his father within 2 years at the age of 20. But this didn't stop his drive for the American dream, taking on the responsibility of raising his 13-year-old sister, Darlene, who he later adopted, and running his family business, all while still in school. Senator Lindsey Graham was 71 years old.
For more on his life and legacy, let's bring in Chief Congressional Correspondent Chad Pergram. Good morning, Chad. It's sad news to wake up to, and I know you knew him well.
Yeah, I had just tried to talk to him a couple of weeks ago. The Senate has been out this past week, and I was trying to get him. I chased him out the Senate door out to a car, and he was just in a hurry and didn't have time to talk at that point because Lindsey Graham was always on the move. As you indicate, he had just been to Ukraine. It was very typical to hear from his office, that he was going to be in the Middle East or he was going to be in Europe or someplace, and would we care to have an interview with him? I mean, he was always in the middle of almost every debate. And I think it was very striking that he had just been to Ukraine over the weekend here. He had celebrated his 71st birthday on Thursday and met with Vladimir Zelensky and trying to figure out a way to end this war. And this is what he had to say in Ukraine just a couple of days ago.
"I've never been more optimistic than I am today that we have the formula to end this war. Help Ukraine be more lethal. Let those supporting Russia to know it's going to be a price to be paid if you keep doing it. And to try to find an off-ramp, not to humiliate Putin, but to end this war so that Ukraine will thrive and survive."
And here's what's interesting about Lindsey Graham. He had been a House member, was elected to the House in the big Republican wave in 1995. He kind of moved onto the national stage. He was one of the House prosecutors presenting the case of impeachment to the Senate in 1998, 1999, when there was the Monica Lewinsky scandal with President Clinton. Basically, what they did is they impeach in the House, and then they appoint these managers to kind of prosecute the case before the Senate, and he was one there. He took over for Strom Thurmond, who was the longtime 100-plus age senator. In 2003, Strom Thurmond retired from the Senate. And so you basically had only two people in that Senate seat since the mid-1950s. Strom Thurmond had served in that seat for decades. He retired at age 100, and Lindsey Graham took over in early 2003. The other thing that's always struck me about Lindsey Graham is that he was at the center of every single policy debate, whether it be Iran. I remember talking to him the night before the airstrike started because there was some question about whether or not in late February they were going to continue or not. I remember a lengthy conversation I had with him in 2005. This is early 2005 when President George W. Bush was trying to partially privatize Social Security. And who was at the forefront of that? It was Lindsey Graham. I talked to a former aide of his just a few moments ago who described him as having an alligator skin and said, he didn't take the criticism that was sometimes lobbed at him personally, but said that he always, could kind of disarm people. They said he probably could have been a stand-up comedian. People just didn't realize how funny he was, when the camera lights turned off or he was trying to talk to some people off to the side. Now, here's what has to happen. As we say, we look at what the Senate situation is right now. We don't know the health condition of Mitch McConnell, the former Senate Majority Leader, who's been in the hospital for weeks. The Senate is supposed to come back in the coming days here. And so obviously they have to figure out, what his status is. But right now, the Senate on the Republican side of the aisle is down to 51 votes. They have trouble moving things through the Senate right now. And so what will they do to replace him? Under South Carolina law, we're told that, and this is the process here, that they would probably have to have an appointment. Now, whether or not that's a caretaker senator, somebody who doesn't run. Again, Lindsey Graham was on the ballot this fall. He was running in the fall of 2026. He had just secured the Republican nomination for another term. So they would have to appoint somebody to the Senate. I would imagine that's going to be a conversation between Henry McMaster and also President Trump, who he wants in the Senate. Do they want just a caretaker senator? We have one caretaker senator right now, Alan Armstrong, the Republican from Oklahoma, who took over for Mark Wayne Mullen, who is now the Homeland Security Secretary, of course. And do they want that person to be a caretaker, or do they want that person to run in a primary? I'm told that probably in about 5 to 6 weeks, they would have to have another Republican primary to determine who their nominee is. And then that person, if they win in the fall, would take over on January 3rd. Here are the people I would look at in South Carolina. I would look at Russell Fry, the Republican representative from South Carolina. I would also look at 2 members. It's not a big delegation in South Carolina, but I would look at 2 of the other members who ran for governor, Nancy Mace and also Ralph Norman. Now, both of them have had a little bit of a fraught relationship with President Trump. Now, whether or not that's something that they can work out, we just don't know. But operationally in the Senate, this causes problems because Lindsey Graham was the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee. You've been hearing a lot of conversation about them trying to do Budget Reconciliation 3.0. This is another policy bill. The Senate is looking a little more askance at this compared to the House of Representatives, but they'd have to have another Budget Committee chairman. He's been a member of the Judiciary Committee for a long time. They have a confirmation hearing coming up for Todd Blanche, the acting attorney general, to become the attorney general. And whether or not they could even get Todd Blanche's nomination out of committee, certainly not with those votes. They probably wouldn't have that vote this week at all, regardless of what happens in the confirmation hearing. But it makes it very, very tough operationally to do things in the Senate. And that's why we would probably look very quickly for them to figure out, okay, who do we appoint to the Senate, even if that's somebody on a temporary basis, and then who wants to run in that special election primary on the Republican side, probably sometime in late August, maybe 1st of September at the latest, but it's going to be very, very fast. The other thing I would say about Lindsey Graham, and again, I talk about just how he was always at the center of so many issues. I remember kind of chasing him around the Capitol for a while. I was working on a story that we aired on Brett Baer's program some months back about Section 230. That's part of the Telecommunications Act of 1996 that he and others think that we should get rid of because it gives this shield to the telecom companies. And some people believe that's what's contributed to a lot of the social media ills that we have. And he wants to get rid of that. And again, just the reason we were having trouble scheduling the interview for so long was because he was so deep in Iran, he was so deep in dealing with Ukraine and 2 or 3 other subjects that he just didn't have the bandwidth, even though he was very interested in that. I remember I called him one night and he said, yes, I want to do it, but they were just, we were literally having trouble figuring out when to schedule that interview. We did it, we aired the story, but it just shows you the breadth of different things that he was involved in. So Lindsey Graham, very sad news here in Washington, dead unexpectedly at the age of 71 years old here in Washington, D.C.
You did such a nice job walking through the history of all this. And I remember when Strom Thurmond retired, everyone thought there was no way anyone would be able to fill those shoes. And of course, Lindsey Graham did that. and did it quite ably. And as you point out, covering a lot of a broad cross section of issues. You noted also that a lot of people thought that he could have had a go at being a stand-up comedian because he could be very, very funny and very, very disarming. He was obviously fought for a very conservative state and a lot of conservative issues, but he was so effective at working across the aisle that that he could get a lot of things done. And I look back, remember probably every single Republican nominee to the Supreme Court and lower courts that got through because of Lindsey Graham.
Yeah, let me talk about the transformation of Lindsey Graham a little bit. He was going to run for president. He had a short-lived presidential campaign in 2015. He dropped out that fall. He was opposed to President Trump, said some pretty inflammatory things about why he didn't think that President Trump was fit to be in office. Kind of then started to side with President Trump after the riot at the Capitol, said some pretty negative things about the president then, said count me out at some point, but then got back in President Trump's good graces and was a big advocate for him on Capitol Hill. And I want to go back to the 2018 confirmation fight about Brett Kavanaugh for the Supreme Court. That nomination they thought was going to be very dead in the water with Christine Blasey Ford after she brought forth some of her allegations about Justice Kavanaugh. And the Republicans on the Judiciary Committee were going to handle this in a very kid-gloved way. They brought in somebody else to kind of ask questions of her, a female attorney to kind of do their bidding, because I thought the optic of male senators asking these very probing questions about something that happened when they were back in high school was just going to be a bad optic. And at some point, this kind of spun off the rails. And it was Lindsey Graham who absolutely just shot up from his chair and was really, speaking at the top of his lungs, and it really changed the tenor of the hearing. And I think what happened there is it helped him kind of, get back in the graces of President Trump, understand that he was somebody fighting for the cause, fighting for the justice. He thought that, then nominee Kavanaugh was being ill-treated. It was probably one of the most electrifying moments in that hearing. I want to go back to 2013 when they were trying to work out with the Gang of 14 the immigration reform bill. This was something that he and John McCain and others had worked on. They got almost 2/3 of a vote in the Senate. It never went anywhere in the House. But I was told that because Lindsey Graham was such a good poker player, he kind of had to, think that they had the votes. Now, they had more than 2/3 on that vote. It was a pretty overwhelming vote. But the idea, again, that he was just at the center of everything and the guy that he would come to, covering the Senate for as long as I have, there's people who become the majority leader, the minority leader, the whip, et cetera. Those are never positions that Lindsey Graham had. But there historically have been people in the Senate who always kind of made things work behind the scenes. Sometimes they were very prominent. You saw them on the air a lot. You saw them in Senate debate a lot. But I think of somebody like Ted Kennedy of Massachusetts. I think of somebody like Richard Russell, who the Russell Senate office building is named after. They completely knew how the Senate operated and knew where all the votes were on every single issue on both sides. And that was Lindsey Graham. And that's why this is just not the death of a senator. This is why foreign leaders like Benjamin Netanyahu and others are sending in their tribute because he was such a force.
Well, sure. And to your point, we can remember back when it was Lindsey Graham who was part of the Three Amigos, right? It was Senator John McCain, Senator Joe Lieberman, and Lindsey Graham. And you saw this sort of group that could work across the aisles. But I want to go back just for a second, because I think when we look back on, and you're right, Chad, you're so right that he was at the center of every policy debate. I think one of the defining moments in his political career was the Kavanaugh hearing, because as you rightfully point out, the Kavanaugh nomination looked all but dead in the water, and out of nowhere during Kavanaugh's Judiciary Committee hearing, he all of a sudden just lit up the entire committee and his entire Senate colleagues, both Democrats and Republicans, calling what was being done to him the most despicable sham he had ever seen in his political life, and pointed to everyone on that committee, including the Republicans, and said, if you vote against this man, this is a travesty. And it totally changed the trajectory. I would say it got Kavanaugh across the aisle, but it also demonstrated not only could he put himself at the center of policy debates, but he could wield political capital in ways that some senators and leaders just don't quite learn. Speak to that if you can.
Yeah, he understood what capital that he had, and he understood, at certain points, when to use anger. That was an example during the Brett Kavanaugh hearing. I've seen him do that before in other debates, but also, as I said, be disarming with humor. That's what makes somebody like Senator Graham, be they a Democrat or a Republican, very effective. Somebody who can kind of do that and understand, where those different power sources are coming from. And if you make a miscalculation on that, and I didn't see Lindsey Graham make very many political miscalculations, that's significant. He thought at that moment, for obvious reasons, that maybe they could salvage the nomination, and the only way to salvage it was through what he did. Because again, this was the second confirmation hearing for Kavanaugh. Remember, we had gone through this, the allegations about when Christine Blasey Ford came much later. And again, even in dealing with his relationship with President Trump, there was a point where, he was very outspoken, coming into 2016 against President Trump, thought that he was not fit for office. I remember a very frank conversation with myself and some other reporters in the Senate subway station where he really tore into, Donald Trump, who I don't even think at that point in 2016 was the nominee yet, and just did not think that this guy was fit. But again, he always understood where that political power was ebbing and flowing. Obviously, President Trump was elected in 2016, and he moved to that and figured out, okay, if we're going to get things done, okay, that's where we need to be. Some people might, criticize that of being a chameleon. But honestly, in the years that I've been around Capitol Hill, those who get things done on both sides of the aisle are those who understand where those power centers ebb and flow, and then figure out a way to move toward that. And then, sometimes you're trying to get something for your state. Sometimes you're trying to get something for your party. Sometimes you're trying to get something for yourself. You need the president's support or the support of the leader or somebody for your election. Lindsey Graham was always somebody who was able to kind of morph in that sense, and that worked to his benefit.
Yeah, it's very interesting, this relationship between President Trump and Lindsey Graham. You're right. He was a huge critic. I remember being in a room with him once where he was not just making fun of President Trump, but his voters. And he clearly did not like him in 2016. But the Kavanaugh moment was a bonding moment on both sides. I think President Trump saw that Lindsey Graham could get things done. And then Lindsey Graham realized, I think, as you rightly point out, that this was going to be the next president, or this was going to be the president. This is where the power is. I need to go to him. He was clearly much more hawkish and much more prone towards what some would say neoconism than President Trump, who originally started as, no more new wars. And so I think that relationship, I think Lindsey brought.
From first call to final invoice, Service Titan is the only integrated intelligence that automates your entire workflow, built for visionaries.
I think Lindsey brought President Trump over to his side on sometimes, and I think President Trump brought him over. I also will say that the game of golf can be very bonding. Both of them love the game. They played often at Bedminster and some of his other clubs, the president's other clubs. So I think this was also a bonding moment. Chad, the last time I saw Lindsey Graham was at the state dinner with King Charles, and he sat right across from me. He looked fine to me. You've seen him in person more recently. I know it appears, at least from the reports we've seen, that it might have been a cardiac arrest. His father died of a cardiac arrest. But the reports also say something about a brief illness. Do you have any more information about that?
We just don't know at this stage. I remember, when I went to interview him, and again, this was some months ago, it was in the late winter or early spring, and this was a separate one-off interview, just not grabbing him in the hallway, as we often did, about the Section 230 story. But I remember he had a pretty bad cold then. And I will say this, I didn't know, I hadn't heard anything about any health issues surrounding him or anything like that. I will say that because he was always globetrotting, be it the Middle East or Europe or someplace else, I did notice in the past few months, he did look a little more tired and a little more haggard. As I said, he had just turned 71 a couple of days ago. I don't know if that's age or something else, but it was just something, as somebody who covers the Hill on a day-to-day basis, you notice things about people, especially people who've been there for an awfully long time. And I noticed that he did look, I would say in the past year or so, it was just a visual recognition. He didn't seem to be to look as maybe as physically strong as he was. That's just my observation. I want to be very clear. I don't know if there's anything that's going on. I do know he was sick and suffering from a pretty bad cold that lingered for a while when I had him, and I think that was one of the reasons we couldn't get the interview at some point, because he had been sick and his voice sounded bad and all that. So I don't want to read too much into that, but this is always the thing about covering things in Washington. I said this on the air in the middle of the night here when we broke into coverage this morning. I said there's an old Native American phrase that death comes and it's always out of season. Here, everybody in Washington is focused on Mitch McConnell and is he going to be able to come back? They've not been very forthcoming about that. Just a couple of weeks ago, everybody was saying, what about Tom Kean Jr., the Republican representative from New Jersey? What is his situation? We just don't know. And then somebody you're not even focusing on just passes away suddenly, and it's just remarkable. And I think that's part of the shock in this, that this was not something that was expected by anyone here on Capitol Hill.
Truly. Chad Pergram, thank you so much for your long history and wisdom.
So keep in mind, now the Republican Party, especially in the Senate, is disorganized in a state of flux. It's almost as if God is cursing Trump's administration and inhibiting him from being able to pass the types of legislation that he wants to pass domestically because he failed internationally. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the omega-3. Omega-3 will help with your cardiovascular health. It will help to bring down inflammation, control your lipid profile, help to bring down LDL levels and increase your HDL levels, and reduce over stickiness of your red blood cells to reduce overclotting. Omega-3 is super important to take every day for cardiovascular health. Clarity factor helps to allow you to get focused on tasks. You'll be able to concentrate. Take it in the morning or the mid-afternoon, take it every day, and you'll be able to do cognitive tasks with more endurance. And over time, you're going to have the better neuroplasticity, the positive neuroplasticity that will link up your neurons together. They'll have more dendritic connections, so you'll be thinking faster and have better memory. Please take my advice and take the clarity factor every day. Vitamin B complex, really important if you're 40 years of age or older. The first 4 B vitamins helps to increase your energy levels. It involves in the electron transport chain to allow you to build higher concentrations of ATP, which is a very important energy source for your cells. Your tissues will perform better, your cellular metabolism will be better, and you'll be able to protect your neurons through B12. And then another great stack to help with brain function and boost up that immune system, magnesium and zinc, super important. Vitamin C and magnesium helps with the immune system and the brain function, and also your dermal layer for your skin. Stack them together. And if you really want to improve your dermal layer, take the vitamin C and magnesium with the collagen that I have and drink filtered water, and that will cross-link and help with the dermal layer. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great supplements that I offer. It helps your health, but it also helps support the channel so I can reach a larger audience to be able to inform the public on what's going on in the world and how to mitigate through the risks and improve your health. So it's a win-win. So please help support the work that I do by getting the great supplements that I offer. And you follow my lead on this, you will slow down the aging process. These are supplements that I take. Okay. I want to listen into, there's fresh U.S. strikes on Iran. This is by the BBC.
To what we've seen in the course of the last few days, this is the third. Across the Gulf region, nations are taking emergency action following a fresh round of US strikes on Iran.
Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps released this video, which they say shows missiles launched at US targets in the Middle East. In Bahrain, people have been urged to shelter in their nearest safe location because of an aerial threat. Meanwhile, in Kuwait, it's deployed armed forces to defend itself from an attack. It condemned the missile launch on its territory, calling it a dangerous escalation. And the UK Maritime Trade Operation says a container ship just east of Oman was damaged. A fire on board causing people to abandon the vessel. 10 Indian nationals have been rescued and one is still missing. Well, these pictures are from Doha in Qatar. 3 people there, including 1 child, were injured by falling shrapnel following Iranian attacks. US Central Command says it's hit 140 Iranian military targets, including missile and drone sites, as well as ammunition storage facilities. These are the latest pictures released by US forces of those fresh strikes. Iran says it's disabled a second vessel in the Strait of Hormuz and says it's closed the strait until further notice. Well, let's get more on this from our correspondent in Jerusalem, Caroline Davies. And Caroline, just bring us up to date with the reaction from Iran to this latest wave of strikes.
I think all of this is really centering around the Strait of Hormuz, as you detailed there. We've seen a number of strikes back and forth between the US and Iran, but this all started after there was another ship that had been hit close to the coast of Oman. We then had a response from Iran saying that it had fired a warning shot, struck a vessel that it said that was travelling on what it referred to as an unapproved route. It then also gave a warning saying that retaliation would be met with a severe response. But of course, we then saw a US strikes on Iran, Iran strikes on US military bases, very similar to what we've seen in the course of the last few days. This is the 3rd time we've had a strike in the course of a week. And I think it's worth pointing out 2 things. Firstly, the fact that this cargo ship seems to have been hit or seems to have had sustained this damage while close to the coast of Oman. And secondly, that referral by Iran talking about an unapproved route. Now, Iran wants to have ships coming through its designated routes, which go closer to its coastline. Meanwhile, there have been other routes that have been going close to the Omani coastline through the Strait of Hormuz. The big concern I think that Iran has is it does not want to look like it is losing any form of control over the Strait of Hormuz, not just because that is important for its negotiating position, because ultimately that is one of its major trump cards in the negotiation between the US and Iran, the fact that it can ultimately end up having a stranglehold over the global economy, as we saw earlier, of course, in this conflict too, when the strait was closed previously, but also Iran is portraying this as being part of its sovereignty, that it wants to have control over the strait. Meanwhile, the US has been adamant that Iran does not have control over the Strait of Hormuz, and so every time one of these ships is being hit, the US then responds back, and the whole cycle begins again. I think the bigger question as well is what happens next from here, and whether or not this tactic is working. So if the point of the US response was to try to deter Iran from hitting these ships in the first place, that doesn't seem yet to be working, because of course we've had these series of strikes. The same thing has happened again. So the next question is, how do you get out of this tit for tat back and forth loop that both sides seem to be stuck in at the moment? Is it further escalation, or is it some form of discussion and talking to try to find some form of common ground? That is one of the big questions. And of course, we do know that that there are due to be talks happening in Oman. We know as well that I think one of the sort of Iranian officials have already arrived in Oman for those discussions. But you can only imagine the level of tension, the level of difficulty in approaching those talks after the level of escalation we've seen in the course of this week.
And Caroline, as you say, that the cycle continues. Where do you think this leaves the memorandum of understanding at this point?
Well, I think, President Trump obviously earlier in the week said the ceasefire was over, and the Iranian side have said that the MOU was violated. Really, it depends on whether or not the 2 sides want to use this as some form of structure to be able to move forward. They were able to obviously get to a point where this MOU was signed. Can they get back to it? And I think this is one of the real issues here, is that it seems like even some of the common ground that they were able to make up to get to the point of signing the MOU, how quickly it all seems to be potentially deteriorating. It might be that they use that MOU as a continued structure at the moment. It's not entirely clear where it's completely and utterly gone, or whether it could still be brought back and used. But as I say, President Trump has been very clear that the ceasefire is over, in his words. So whether or not they're able to find this common ground to get to some further resolution and to stop further escalation, that will be what many people around the world, particularly in the Gulf that have been so directly affected, will be watching to see.
Caroline Davis in Jerusalem.
And because of this ceasefire and this MOU collapsing, we're going to see oil prices start to go up because the strait is closed. So the trading on Monday, because this recording is on Sunday, the trading on Monday, most likely for energy, will go up. So we probably will see oil tick up, natural gas tick up. Trump will probably say something in the news to try to calm markets down. I wouldn't be surprised if the S&P 500 sells off a little bit. We'll probably see a little bit of an increase in VIX. It was trading at around 15 or 16 on Friday. Might see it trade up to 18 or 19. And we probably will see some further escalation between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon, which will further accelerate the kinetic events that are taking place in the region. I'm going to go to Al Jazeera. The founder of Al Jazeera, I think, passed away. We're going to listen to it, but this is another one of those events that I'm talking about, that all these things are happening at the same time. The ceasefire collapsing, the MOU collapsing, Al Jazeera's founder killed, or not killed, I should say, passed away. He wasn't killed. He passed away. And Lindsey Graham passes away. There's a tumultuous set of events that are emerging and bubbling as we approach 9/11, 2026, and go into this 2 years of tumultuous times. Also pay attention to what is happening to OpenAI, Anthropic, and NVIDIA. Why? There's overinvestment in artificial intelligence. There's overinvestment in the hyperscalers. And what is fascinating, and maybe I can find the video, but it's fascinating that there is a manufactured consensus through scare tactics to bump up the valuation of OpenAI and especially Anthropic. The valuation before Mythos came out, the valuation for Anthropic was approximately $380 billion. And Anthropic said, well, we had this new version that comes out, and we can find vulnerabilities in infrastructure and in your code and in your websites. And so the Treasury Department, the Defense Department, they were all freaked out. People independently tried using open source models and existing models to see if the vulnerabilities could be found compared to Mythos. And they found out that other models could find the vulnerabilities too. So there was a manufactured consensus to think that Mythos was much more powerful than some of these other models that were already in the open domain or currently being used. So you create this scare tactic, and then all of a sudden companies think that they need to buy into Anthropic, and now they're trying to push for a $1 trillion market cap. It's a house of mirrors that's going on with Anthropic. Something very similar is happening with OpenAI. They spent a lot of money to create the models that they have. It costs a lot to run a query, and the revenue that's coming in nowhere matches the actual expenses. It's not a viable business model. And these two players, Anthropic and OpenAI, are the bulk of the leases for compute. And these servers companies are buying chips from NVIDIA based on a business model that is not sustainable for Anthropic and OpenAI. OpenAI and Anthropic do these lease agreements. They're using this computation. Eventually, they're going to have to default on their leases, on their projects, whatever, because less revenues coming in compared to expenses. They're in the hole. And eventually, people are going to stop buying server equipment, buying chips, and NVIDIA is going to crash. There's a 40 to 60% chance of a major correction in the S&P 500 due to bad earnings from NVIDIA. If we have an earnings announcement where there's a declining revenue and it's viewed as bad, and that's a little qualitative, qualitative. If there's a bad earnings for NVIDIA, this whole thing's going to crash because all the investors are going to pull out. They're going to pull out of all the hyperscalers. They're going to pull out all the AI company investment, and you can kind of see that there's a rotation happening already and going into defensive stocks. The smart money's already moving away from this stuff. So all it takes is one bad quarter where NVIDIA says, oh, revenues are going down, projects are getting canceled, these server companies are not getting the revenues that they thought. OpenAI can't fund their operations, so they have to default on their debt. They have to default on some of their contracts with some of these server companies, and it all falls apart. How in such a short amount of time, from releasing Mythos to now, that Anthropic thinks that they can be $1 trillion company from 380 billion, yet they don't make any money? How can that be? It's manufactured scare tactic that they're going to save the world because they see some sort of vulnerability, even though the other models found it too. 75, 80% of the time. It's a house of cards. It's a house of mirrors. And so this is emerging. The economic part of it is emerging with the curse. And now you have these individuals, prominent individuals, that are starting to die off. They're either killed or they are passing away. Things are going to get very difficult in the next 2 years. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. What this will do is help to improve your different systems, like your cardiovascular system, helps your brain function, helps with musculature, helps your immune system and your endocrine system, revs up your metabolism, helps you to control your blood glucose levels. You get the minerals and the vitamins that you need on a daily basis by taking this. But you get a lot of other compounds in here that will help to slow down the aging process. And you will notice that you have more vitality. And your skin will look better, your hair will be healthier. You will be just a healthier person by taking Boomer Boost. If you take it every day, you're going to slow down the aging process. Now, you can take it separately, or I recommend stacking it. Now, barley, gladiator barley or heirloom barley, stacks really well with Boomer Boost. And what the barleys do is detoxify your body, brings down inflammation, and soaks up free radicals. So you're helping your immune system and your endocrine system, brain function, cardiovascular system. You'll even recover faster after a workout. And when you do that regularly, you're slowing down the aging process. But you can stack it with the Boomer Boost for synergistic benefits. Now, the difference between Gladiator Barley and Heirloom Barley is you get one extra benefit with Gladiator Barley. It helps to build muscle. So that's a great way to build that muscle. Now, if you're 40 years of age or older, get Myotrol. Myotrol has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to help with the gene expression to build muscle and to maintain that muscle, to reduce atrophy. When you're older, you can't build muscle because of methylation of your genes. You get older, it's harder to maintain muscle. But it's important to get muscle because you're going to be able to get denser bone structure by doing resistance training, by having better back muscles, you'll have a better posture and your venous return flow will improve. Your lymphatic flow will flow easier. And with more musculature, you're going to improve your brain function because you'll have higher concentrations of myokines and BDNF, which are neuroprotective. So taking Myotrol and building muscle actually is going to help your brain. Now, you can stack it with the Gladiator Barley, and that's a great way to build the muscle. This helps with the gene expression. Gladiator Barley has the ingredients, the basic building blocks to build that muscle. So it'll be easier to build the muscle. Now, if you're an athlete, younger or older, I highly recommend taking the Gladiator Barley and the Myotrol together for gaining strength for your sport. It's a great way to get healthy and stronger. So you can take lessons learned from sports medicine and apply it to your life to slow down the aging process, even if you're not an athlete. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the great supplements that I offer. The link is in the description of this video. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, let's play what's going on with the Al Jazeera founder.
Hello, I'm Riley Carlson, and this is Al Jazeera live from Doha. Here's what's coming up. Qatar's father Emir Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani has died at the age of 74. Leaders from around the world pay tribute. The father Emir's funeral will be held in the Qatari capital in the coming hours. Also ahead, 4 Gulf countries say they intercepted Iranian missiles after U.S. strikes across southern Iran. And the U.S. military says the Strait of Hormuz is open and its forces are ready to ensure freedom of navigation, but Iran declared the waterway closed. Qatar's father Emir, Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, has died at the age of 74. He ruled for 18 years, reshaping the country's domestic and global footprint. His funeral will be held later on Sunday here in the capital, Doha. Mohammed Jamjoom takes a look back at his life.
The father Emir, Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani, was the man who took a small peninsula and turned it into one of the most influential nations on earth. Born in Doha in 1952, he was educated at Britain's Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst, before rising through the ranks of Qatar's armed forces. Named heir apparent in 1977, he spent nearly 2 decades running the country's day-to-day affairs before taking power from his father in a bloodless transition in 1995. What followed was one of the most remarkable transformations in modern history. Sheikh Hamad bet everything on Northfield, the world's largest offshore gas reserve. Within a decade, Qatar became the largest exporter of liquefied natural gas. Under his rule, the economy grew more than 20-fold. A quiet Gulf state became a global financial power. But he understood that wealth alone does not build a nation. Within months of taking power, Sheikh Hamad launched the Qatar Foundation, bringing the world's leading universities to Doha. He scrapped media censorship, abolished the Ministry of Information, and in 1996 launched a television channel that would change the Arab world forever, Al Jazeera. For the first time, Arab audiences heard voices their governments didn't want them to hear. The opinion and the other.
Now, just keep this in mind. Prominent figures in the region, in American politics, in Middle Eastern politics, they're starting to die off. Now, yes, they're older, but the thing is that this is all happening under the Trump administration. This is all happening on the eve as we go into this tumultuous curse that's coming. Something big is emerging here, and people aren't paying attention. So you better pay attention to me because I have the pattern recognition to recognize it. Now, I'm not the only one. There are other people that see it too, but there are few that can. That's the point. There's a mosaic that's starting to emerge here. There's a chaos that's starting to bubble up. But that chaos that's taking place is starting to allow for something else on the other end to move forward. It's almost like we're going through birth pains. So please pay attention to me. It's really important.
As Qatar's international profile grew, so did its diplomatic ambitions. Under Sheikh Hamed's leadership, the country established itself as a trusted mediator, helping to facilitate dialogue and negotiations in conflicts across the Middle East and beyond, a role that would become a defining feature of its foreign policy. When popular uprisings swept parts of the Arab world, Qatar adopted an active regional role through diplomacy, humanitarian support, and extensive media coverage. In Libya, it joined the international coalition enforcing the UN-mandated no-fly zone. Its approach attracted both praise and criticism, but reflected Sheikh Hamed's belief that Qatar should play an active role in Middle East affairs. And no people were closer to his heart than the Palestinians. In 2012, he crossed into Gaza, the first head of state to break the isolation of the Israeli blockade. He brought with him $400 million for hospitals, homes, and roads, and a message the world could not miss: Gaza is not alone. In 2010, he delivered what many thought impossible: the right to host the FIFA World Cup, the first Arab and Muslim nation to do so. 12 years later, in 2022, that vision became reality when Qatar successfully staged the tournament, bringing the world's biggest sporting event to the Middle East for the first time. But perhaps Sheikh Hamed's most remarkable act came in 2013 when he did what Arab leaders rarely do. He gave up power voluntarily. At just 61, he handed the reins to his son, His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, telling his people it was time for a new generation to lead. No crisis, no pressure, a peaceful, deliberate transfer of power, almost without precedent in the region's modern history. It earned him the title by which he would be known for the rest of his life: the Father Emir. Even after stepping down, Sheikh Hamed remained a respected national figure, offering continuity and support during Qatar's continued development, while allowing the new leadership to chart its own course. Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani leaves behind a nation transformed, richer, louder, and prouder than the one he inherited. A country that learned under his rule to think beyond its borders. The father of modern Qatar, and in many ways, the architect of its rise to the global stage.
Now, keep in mind who just passed away that's very similar. Ted Turner from CNN. He started CNN. These two figures set in motion international 24-hour news. Now, CNN was the first to do it. But Al Jazeera is an important player, too, now, in the whole news scene. Something big is coming. These giants of industry are dying off. Now, yes, they're older, and there's people die off when you get old. But at this moment in time, all of a sudden, there's something bigger happening. please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the collagen. Collagen will help with your skin, the health of your nails and hair, your musculature, your bone density, and even your joints. It's really important to take every day if you want to remodel your joints. Also stack it with the collagen. Now, if you want to improve your skin, stack it with the vitamin C and magnesium and drink filtered water. That will help to cross-link and improve your dermal layer. Now, I have structural nanosilver, and structural nanosilver you can get in a tube form or the quick dispenser form called Renew. Use them the same way. All right. You can put it on your skin as a daily skincare topically, then it'll help your skin. So this is either one of these is a great stack with the collagen. The collagen you take every day to help with your dermal layer. Take the vitamin C and drink the filtered water to help with the cross linkage to improve the dermal layer. The gel is a topical that will help to improve your skin. And the C60 and resveratrol helps the basal layer. So you're hitting all the three major sections of your skin to improve the health of the skin. In addition, structural nanosilver will heal a wound quicker. And structural nanosilver is perfect for the cold season and the allergy season. Lightly coat your nostrils and it will neutralize. Stay active for 5.5 hours. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nanosilver gel. And I have structural nanosilver toothpaste. It whitens your teeth, freshens your breath, brings down inflammation at the gum line, reduces inflammation, which is super important. It neutralizes. You're helping with the health of your oral cavity. And when you do that, when you improve your oral cavity health, you're reducing cardiovascular problems. A lot of people don't realize cardiovascular disease can be exacerbated by poor oral hygiene. This has structural nanosilver, so it's going to neutralize. And it's really important to use every day, especially during the cold season. It has no fluoride, and it's made from the structural nanosilver to help to neutralize. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Let's listen into Al Jazeera now about the attacks that are happening.
U.S. airstrikes on southern Iran. Iranian state television says explosions were heard in Bushehr and Asalueh, and port cities of Bandar Abbas, Sarik, and Shabahar were also hit. Explosions were reported on Keshem Island as well. The strikes come after the U.S. military says it hit around 140 Iranian military targets overnight. Central Command released a statement saying the Strait of Hormuz is open to all vessels. It says U.S. forces are ready to ensure freedom of navigation, but Iran's maritime authority rejected those claims, saying passage through the Strait of Hormuz is not possible until stability is restored. In just a moment, we'll speak to our White House correspondent, Kimberly Halkett, who's live for us in Washington. But first, let's go to Rasul Sardar, who is in Tehran. So, Rasul, once again, Iran is saying the Strait of Hormuz is closed. What else is it saying about where the situation is at the moment?
Well, indeed. So there had been a statement released by the IRGC saying that the Strait of Hormuz is closed until further notice. And then just a little ago, roughly around an hour ago, the Persian Gulf State Authority, which is a body that was established by Iran during the war to manage the maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. It's not recognized internationally. However, Iranians are saying that any ship that wants to pass through the Strait of Hormuz needs to contact with this authority, get the permission, get the clearance, and based on that, if they are approved, they can pass. So they also have released a statement saying that due to the recent illegal movements of the United States military forces in the region, passage through the Strait of Hormuz is currently not possible. As soon as the stability and calm are restored, all requests will be reviewed based on the schedule, and the necessary permits will be issued. So the only way to obtain a transit permit is to contact the Iranian authorities. So here, the sticking point more and more is becoming the Strait of Hormuz. That is now the main source of the tensions. Iranians are saying that the fifth article of the Memorandum of Understanding gives Iran the authority to be the sole actor in managing the Strait of Hormuz, managing the international maritime traffic through these critical choke points. And Americans are saying, well, that is not the case. They have a different interpretation of the Memorandum of Understanding, and that's why recently we are seeing back and forth military engagements, and each sides are attacking each other. Of course, that is endangering the prospect of negotiations and the diplomacy.
Has been calling for
So
changes
if that
to
is the case, then
retirement
both sides are
investment
saying
funds.
there's a big misinterpretation here about not just Article 5 of this MOU, but about several other articles as well. Where is the diplomacy at this point?
Well, indeed, as you also said, it's not only about the Strait of Hormuz. So there are three important articles of the Memorandum of Understanding. The first article, the very first article, is about the cessation of hostilities, complete ceasefire at all fronts. And since this Memorandum of Understanding was signed over 3 weeks ago, now this is the fifth time that they are attacking each other. And last night's attacks were the largest conducted by the United States. And Iran's response also was perhaps the more widespread one, hitting 5 countries in the region. And so that Article 1 is definitely not in place. It's not working anymore. The fifth article of the Memorandum of Understanding is about the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. Now the IRGC saying that the strait is closed. And the 10th article of the Memorandum of Understanding is about lifting the sanctions on Iran's oil and petrochemical products. And also the same very article says, during the negotiations for a period of 60 days, there will be no new sanctions imposed on Iran. So just remember, the United States 3 days ago had revoked Iran's license to sell its oil, and also they reimposed new sanctions on Iran. So practically speaking, the Memorandum of Understanding has collapsed. And the more dangerous point is that.
Hi, performance review for GETTR.
Performance review is next week, right?
No, yesterday we said it.
From Tehran, thank you for that. Let's go to our White House correspondent, Kimberly Halkett now, who's live in Washington. So Kimberly, let's start on the Strait of Hormuz then, because Tehran says that it's closed, but CENTCOM says, and I want to get the wording right, that U.S. military forces are positioned and prepared to ensure freedom of navigation. Are we getting any more clarification on what that might actually mean in practice?
Yeah, the U.S. President Donald Trump speaking on the national news programs on Sunday here in the United States in the last couple of hours, laying out what he believes is the apparent contradiction here, and that is over the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. president saying that it is open, and that is obviously something very different than what the Iranians are saying. But the U.S. president maintains that there is no Iranian sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz. This is an international waterway. And as a result, as you read in that CENTCOM statement, the United States now feels that this is sort of the primary driver in this conflict, is keeping this international waterway open.
Okay, Kimberly Halkett reporting live for us from Washington. Kimberly, thank you. Still ahead here on Al Jazeera. Fruit grown on stolen land. We'll explain how Israeli companies are profiting off.
All right, we're going to go to Imis now, talking about some changes to retirement accounts, potentially through the Trump administration. I don't know what that is, so we're going to listen. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the turmeric. What this will do, turmeric will bring down inflammation and soak up free radicals. That's super important for your cardiovascular system and brain function. Help to slow down aging. Lignans helps with the immune system and your endocrine system. Brings down inflammation, soaks up free radicals. And ashwagandha root controls cortisol levels and blood glucose levels. Helps with your cardiovascular health and helps with your immune system. Now, you can take these separately, but I highly recommend that you take them together because they're synergistic to help to slow down the aging process. And by taking the turmeric, the lignans, and the ashwagandha root, you're boosting up your immune system and your endocrine system. You're helping your cardiovascular system. You're helping brain function. You're going to be able to recover quicker after a workout. And you're going to slow down that aging process because you're targeting the three major areas: soaking up free radicals, bringing down inflammation. And when you do that, you're helping those cells to produce more energy. And the other benefits of helping with your cardiovascular system, helping with your brain function, helping with your immune system and your endocrine system, those are all beneficial to help slow down the aging process. So please go to my store, get the ashwagandha root, the lignans, and the turmeric, stack them together. A lot of people, they just take them separately. The magic is stacking them. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Also, detoxifying your body is super important for your overall health. Your tissues and your organ systems will perform better. Zeolite, you take every day, 3 small drops underneath your tongue and drink filtered water. This zeolite you can take every day. Some people's zeolite you can't. This you can. Zeolite will bind to heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals and allow you to urinate them out within 6 to 8 hours. Take 3 small drops, drink filtered water, and detoxify your body. Your immune system and your endocrine system will improve. And when you do that, you're slowing down the aging process because part of aging is an accumulation of toxins. So if you get rid of those and you clean your environment by throwing away cleaning supplies that you don't need, the chemicals that are in your home, or if you do need them, put them in double layered containers. In addition, make sure you drink filtered water and stay away from processed foods. Processed foods have many ingredients that accumulate in your body that are slowing down the aging process and that are not healthy for you. You want to get rid of those. You want to detoxify your body. Get the zeolite. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Let's listen to Stephanie Rule to find out what is going on with your 401k.
President Trump has been calling for changes to retirement investment funds like your 401k. It is moved back by Big Wall Street. According to ProPublica, the president wants less regulated and often risky investments like private equity and cryptocurrency, but doing so could roll back major legal protections for employees. That means you and me. Joining me now, the reporter behind this piece, Paul Keel. Bill and Scott are still here. Walk us through these proposed changes, because this is definitely not something people pay attention to unless 4 years from now you go to retire and suddenly your 401k is filled with crypto and you're worth zero.
Right. So this started last year. There's an executive order that President Trump released that said, we want more of these alternative assets in 401ks. It's sort of a tragedy that this hasn't happened larger at scale. The reason it hasn't happened is simply because employers are afraid. There's very strong legal protection that workers have. It's called ERISA. It's this law that goes back to the 1970s. And it says that when your employer scopes your 401k, they have to keep your interests in mind first, and they have to use good judgment.
They have to act as a responsible fiduciary.
Right. And so that's the problem for them, is that employers have looked at that, and they've also looked at crypto or private equity and decided this is too risky. I don't want this exposure. The largest companies can be sued by their workers. And so the solution is to water down that protection, essentially.
Well, wait a minute here. You can pick different funds for your 401k. So if this provision takes place, you just pick, and you don't want the exposure of these alternative investments, you just pick the standard vanilla index fund. And you're fine. So I don't understand what the problem is here. If the individual wants to take risks in alternative investments, that will potentially give them alpha, but a lot of times these types of investments won't pan out for the long term. They would pan out in the short term. But you can be an active rebalancer in a 401k and get alpha and not just track the actual track the yield of the actual market. You may actually go above it. But because you're taking more risk, you might be below the market too in some years. But you can actively rebalance. So having funds that have alternative investments like private equity, private debt, and crypto in a fund that is carved out and not part of a regular index, that's up to the employee. Because when 401ks are set up, the employee has the option to be all in bonds, all in equities, different mutual funds, or different, some 401ks can even do ETFs now. But the point that I'm making is that you can choose from a menu of options. So there's nothing wrong with more options. And if the employee picks a high risk investment, it's the employee's fault. So I don't see anything wrong, at least at the surface level, what Trump's doing. As long as the 401ks have options of vanilla type investments, such as bond investments that are relatively safe and standard, and equity index investing that's just standard. So I don't see anything wrong with this at all, as long as you have a choice. If you don't have a choice and you're buying only into funds that have alternative investments like crypto and private equity and private debt amalgamated into an index fund, then there's a problem. Because when things start to go bad for those alternative investments, you're going to hurt. And they'll go bad quickly, and they'll sell off faster than the actual market when it starts to correct. So I highly recommend that you don't invest in crypto ETFs for your retirement. Do not invest in private equity ETFs or funds and private debt for your retirement. But if you want to, it should be your choice. It just should be carved out from the regular vanilla investing. So I don't see anything wrong with this. The employee is taking the risk.
Water down the protection for those employees, for everyday Americans. So while people aren't paying attention to lots of these rollbacks, should they be? Because not all regulation is good regulation. There's tons of examples where we have too much. But what happens is, if you put, let's say, a polluter in charge of the EPA, you don't get sick today. But 4 or 5 years from now, you get very sick and there's no recourse because the rules were changed and you didn't know.
Yeah, so I mean, we have this funny system where there's sort of split responsibility. So your employer is responsible for choosing the options that you have in your plan, the menu investment options. And they have a legal risk. They're on the hook if there's bad options in your plan because the workers have a legal remedy. But it's really up to the financial risk is with the employees, and the workers are paying for the plan. It comes out of your investments. There's fees and stuff like that. So you have to pay attention to what you're doing with 401k. Unfortunately, a lot of people, this is complicated. So a lot of people just choose the default option in their plan. They set it and forget it, and they're relying on their employer to make good choices.
Scott, is the administration right, though, that some things need to be changed about retirement accounts? Maybe there's too much regulation.
I mean, I think directionally, yeah. The reality is that there are a lot of rules around what 401ks can do and not do. I think workers should actually have far more control over what they can invest in. It should be less on the employer side. It should be less linked to employment to give workers more power to move and so forth. And so, the details here are a little different. You just have to wonder how many employers will actually start giving their employees crypto heavy 401ks. My guess is very few, even if there are these legal protections. Employers have a lot
401ks give you options. You can take a very low risk option or a high risk option. Now, if they start allowing you to invest in funds that have alternative investments in it, then you're taking more risk. But it's the employee determining that. You have optionality. So I don't see anything wrong with this. I just don't recommend you doing it. But if you want to and you want to take more risk, that's up to you. It's a free country. 401ks give you optionality. Now, if you're not paying attention to the different options, I mean, most 401ks, there's lots of options. Probably more options than you have time to actually digest. It's not just one option. And that's what they should basically say in the show. Is they're not being truthful to what the real situation is. There's optionality on the risk spectrum. And if you have these crypto, private equity, private debt, which I don't think you should invest in, I don't recommend it, but that's on a higher risk side of the spectrum. But if you want to, that's your choice. I don't see anything wrong with that. But what's going to happen is Wall Street and the banks are creating investment vehicles to be able to find funding for their operations. Like for these hedge funds, they need liquidity, they need money. So what do? They create a fund. And if people buy into the fund, they have more money to deal with. The problem is, if you want to get out of that fund, the private equity company isn't as liquid as it should be because their investments are more longer term. And when a lot of people are pulling out of a private equity fund or a private debt fund, then all of a sudden redemptions start to seize up. And that's what happened with Blackstone and some other funds that were out there. They couldn't do the redemptions because the actual underlying is illiquid. So there are some problems with this issue of the alternative investments. But that if the employee wants to invest in that, read the prospectus and it will tell you that this is high risk and redemption, the ability to redeem your shares may be modulated. So you have to pay attention. That's why it's very simple. Index fund, bond funds, don't get fancy when it comes to your retirement. Don't need to. The standard logic here is that if you put all your money in an S&P 500 fund and the fund tracks the S&P 500 well, and that S&P 500 is averaging 7.2% each year or more. But if it averages 7.2% each year in gains, you will double your money every 10 years. So it's a great investment for the long haul. So in 40 years, you've accumulated. So every 10 years you've doubled, another 10 years you've doubled that, another 10 years you've doubled that, another 10 years you've doubled that. It's a great way to just passively invest, and you don't have to worry about the undulations of the market. When you look at it from the long haul, you start adding in these alternative investments and you're going to hurt your overall return on average each year, and you won't get that every 10-year double effect. In some years you may have more, and then other years you'll have less, and you'll notice that over time, if you look at data sets that would back test the strategy with putting money into alternatives, you probably will see that you're not doubling every 10 years. You may be doubling every 12 years or maybe every 15 years. And that's going to slow down your overall return. So don't do it. Don't do it. But there's nothing wrong with giving that optionality. But who's really going to benefit is not the employee in the 401k. Who's going to benefit is the companies that are rolling out these ETFs to get funds in to play with it. So, like Blackstone or these private equity companies, because Blackstone would may be investing in a bunch of different companies that are not public. Well, to get the funding to put it into those companies, they release a fund, a private equity fund. People buy into it. Now they have the funds in that private equity fund to be able to invest in these companies. But then if there's redemptions, if there's a lot of people redeeming all at once, Blackstone can't sell those companies. They're illiquid. So Blackstone would have a problem redeeming. And that's what has happened in the private equity funds. Don't do it. It's dangerous. But 401ks having that optionality for an employee, so what? So what? It's the employee that's taking the risk.
Employees have a lot of power to choose these things too.
Yeah.
Bill, what is your take? Because to me, this seems like another example of the president giving big business a whole lot more power, which is one of the reasons he's getting so much support from corporate America.
Two things are happening at the same time. It's a windfall for corporate America, but it's also a windfall for individuals that want more risk taking in their 401k. And if you don't want that risk taking, don't invest in those funds. You'll have a whole menu of options to pick from. So it's a win-win for everybody. If you want to be conservative in your investing, you can. If you want to be more risk taking, you can. It helps these companies like Blackstone. So be it. It's a win-win for everybody.
There's another stop to Wall Street, Stephanie. I'm going to dissent here. I don't think this is a good idea at all. 401ks are retirement accounts. They're not meant to be there when you retire. And as someone who's get much closer to retirement than anybody else on this panel, I got to tell you that I'm glad that my 401k is in relatively safe securities and safe investments. Yeah, I mean, it's nice to have choice. I don't have a problem with that. But when you start offering people, private equity investments that are locked up for 10 years or crypto investments that are incredibly volatile, that's not consistent with sensible retirement plans. And you can do
he's right about that.
Risk investment that you want, in your own, outside of your retirement plan. The retirement plan is meant to be there when you retire. And if you squander that opportunity by investing in risky securities and risky assets that could go to zero, then that's not going to be good for anybody. And as you point out, we may not know the repercussions of this for years down the road.
Who lobbied for this? Who loves this?
Two main areas. There's Wall Street asset managers, so Blackstone, including BlackRock, has gotten into this. Apollo, that's one side of it. It's a massive pool of money, the nation's 401ks. And so the goal is to get into those default investments which tend to be like a target date fund. So this is it's a fund that changes as the closer you get to retirement. It gets more and more conservative, moves away from stocks to bonds. They want private equity essentially to be part of that mix. So that's one party, and the other party is basically big business.
Default funds, I'm against. If it's forcing you into a fund as a default, no, alternative investment should not be a part of the mix. Absolutely not. It should be option in, not option out.
Large employers who don't want litigation risk. They don't want their workers suing them, second guessing.
Less protection for individuals, less protection for employees.
Right. Yeah.
Paul, really great, really important reporting. Scott, Bill, always great to have you boys.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotics. You can get it in the veggie cap form or the powdered form. Take either one every day. It will help your gut biome. And by improving your gut biome, you're going to be able to absorb your nutrients better. Your metabolism will improve. You'll reduce inflammation at the gut level. You'll improve the immune system at the gut level. Maintain and improve the mucosal lining of your gut. You'll reduce leaky gut syndrome. You'll reduce your chances of food allergies. You'll improve your skin. You'll also improve your sleeping pattern. And by improving your sleeping, because of a better gut biome, you're going to get into those 3 to 5 cycles of REM sleep and deep sleep to consolidate memory and detoxify your body. You'll be well rested. So you're slowing down the aging process and improving your brain function just because you're improving your gut. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the veggie cap version or the powdered version. Either one, take it every day. And by taking a good probiotic, it also helps with the skin. Vitamin D3, super important for your cardiovascular health, helps with bone density, helps boost up that immune system, and it helps as a gene expression cofactor for your cells to perform properly. Vitamin D3 is important to take every day, especially during the cold season. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. All right, let's see. There was a video that I saw yesterday that was extremely informative of Anthropic and how crazy it is. Now, let me see if I can find the. It was a great video. Where is it? Yeah, I'm gonna have to look for it. I'm gonna switch over to Al Jazeera as I look for it.
It alerts for landslides and debris, its highest warning level. Barbie is weakening as it moves inland towards northern China. It's been downgraded to a tropical storm, but authorities warn powerful winds persist near its center. Parts of the country's south are still reeling from the devastation brought by Typhoon Mesak last weekend. Katrina Yu, Al Jazeera.
In southeastern Bangladesh, at least 44 people have died after days of torrential rain triggered floods and landslides. More than 1 million people are stranded, and authorities are racing to deliver aid. Damaged roads and broken communication lines have isolated thousands of families. Many people haven't been able to cook for days as floodwaters submerged their homes. In Venezuela, the death toll from last month's back-to-back earthquakes has risen to more than 4,300 people. Nearly 17,000 were injured in the quakes that hit the north of the country. The UN estimates that tens of thousands of people are still unaccounted for. And in Chile, where earthquakes are a fact of life, engineers have spent decades perfecting construction techniques that can withstand some of the world's strongest tremors. Now, they say those hard-earned lessons could help Venezuela rebuild. Lucia Newman reports from Santiago.
Earthquakes are a powerful reminder of our planet's restless nature, and almost nowhere is it as restless as in Chile. I am at the very highest point of the very highest building in all of South America, the Costanera Center building in Santiago, Chile. And you might very well ask, why on earth would anybody build a building that large, that tall?
All right, this is a very interesting video about the manufactured consensus of these AI companies to try to convince you need to buy into this idea, and that they're very unprofitable, and that you'll pay attention to the news and think you need this. But what's happening is they're conditioning you periodically as a strategy to actually buy into something that you really don't need. Mythos was a con. The whole story was a con. Now, his name is Brendan Dell, and he breaks it down really well. So let's listen in to his take on this AI executive smoke and mirrors that's pumping up valuations of OpenAI and Anthropic that are way over what they really are worth.
Because I think there's a massive con being run in the American public right now. And I know this because I've helped companies run it before in my career. 7 years ago, this man, Jack Clark, ran policy at OpenAI. And in 2019, they announced a new model called GPT-2, and they refused to release it. They said it was too dangerous. It would be used to generate deceptive bias or abusive language at scale, and the announcement went everywhere. And then they released it a few months later, and nothing happened. Last week, Anthropic announced a new AI model called Mythos, and they said it was too powerful to release to the public. They said the fallout for economies and national security could be severe, and then the announcement went everywhere. And it even pulled Anthropic's CEO into a White House meeting.
CEO Dario Amodei will be meeting with White House Chief of Staff Susan Wiles specifically to talk about Mythos, that is their powerful new cyber-focused AI model.
Here's the thing. Jack Clark is a co-founder of Anthropic, and he drives policy there today. Cry wolf once, it's an accident. Twice, it's a pattern. 3, 4, 5 times, and it starts to feel like a deliberate move. And the reason that this move works, that smart people keep falling for it, is a circus trick that's first documented in 1948 that makes generic claims feel personally accurate. This trick is why horoscopes feel specific. It's why AI feels insightful, and it's the reason that Mythos is too dangerous to release, lands the way that it does. This move is being used right now to create a magic show, an illusion of capabilities that are fueling a once-in-a-generation societal change. And if we don't understand,
it's creating fear. It's creating fear within the enterprise customer base that they need Anthropic to save them from this unknown threat. And when they did this, their valuation was only at $380 billion. Now, the reality is it's probably 1/10 of that. But when they pushed this out and it gained momentum with the government and with the news media, their valuation was projected at $1 trillion. That's crazy money. Where's the profitability? Anthropic's not profitable. How could it be $1 trillion? Doesn't even come near that. The moment that Oracle defaults on something, the moment that AI pulls back, and because you remember, all of the circular financing is because OpenAI can get funding. If it can't get funding from private funders, venture capitalists, private equity, if it can't go to the debt market, if it can't go IPO, it all crashes because their business model is unsustainable. Same thing with Anthropic.
Changes and investments and 180s in our careers and businesses and lives that we can't undo. I'm Brendan Dell. This is the Leverage Class. Let's see through it.
I think he does a great job.
So let me walk you through what was reported in the mainstream press over the last 2 weeks, because I think a lot of us missed what was actually happening. So what I see is Anthropic using the US government as a marketing tool to drive a $1 trillion valuation. Let me show you. So on April 7th, Anthropic announces a new model called Mythos. They say it's too powerful to release to the public. They say the fallout for economies and public safety and national security could be severe. And they say that Mythos has already found thousands of zero-day vulnerabilities across every major operating system and web browser. And then 3 days later, Bloomberg runs this story. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell have called an emergency meeting. And look at who is in this meeting. JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Citigroup, Bank of America, Morgan Stanley. That is the 5 biggest banks in America. And Treasury Secretary and the Fed chair just pulled them in to warn them about a product that Anthropic announced 3 days ago. But here is where this gets interesting. 4 days later, Bloomberg runs a follow-up. Treasury's own Chief Information Officer Sam Korkos is still trying to get access to Mythos. So a week after that,
Let's just step back and not talk. Let's just not focus on Anthropic just for a moment here. Remember what Bloomberg and some of the other business channels were doing during the Bitcoin fiasco. They were pumping up crypto with that crypto bro that was, what was his name? Was his name also Sam? I'd have to look it up. That stole the money from the investors. FTX, I think it is, or FXT or whatever. I'll look it up. But the point here is that the media promoted this guy, that crypto is going to be the next big thing, and and because of the lack of regulation, he was able to trade the private accounts, and there wasn't fiduciary prudence in managing those customer accounts, and blew up the investment, blew up the funds. It was kind of like almost like a Madoff scandal and a Ponzi scheme. But Bloomberg and Emily Chan promoted it. Now, right when it blew up, what did Emily Chan do? She went away for a little while and started doing these little podcasts for Bloomberg. Little stories that you go off site and you start, doing a little bit of a documentary. She promoted crypto and this company almost daily, and it blew up, and she didn't use the journalism that she should have to ask the deep questions like, what's really going on with crypto? And what's your processes for properly managing these accounts from your customers? No, because she was from Silicon Valley and promoting fake it until you make it mentality from California. We ended up having a major meltdown, and many investors lost big money. FTX, I think it was. But I'll look it up. Sam something. I'm gonna look that up. But let's pivot back to Anthropic. But the key here, business channels are promoting this AI craze, just like they promoted the crypto craze.
Urgency meeting with the banks. Treasury cannot independently evaluate the model. So Treasury has just warned 5 of the largest banks in the world about Mythos. And they had not seen Mythos. The only source they had was Anthropic, which means when Treasury pulled the biggest banks in America into an emergency meeting, they were basically reading an Anthropic press release. And the banks took this whole thing enormously seriously, because when Treasury calls, you show up. Now, this on its own isn't the story. This is just one piece. What makes it worth paying attention to is what else happened in this exact same window. Because when you line all of this up, a pattern shows up that I don't think any one of us would notice on its own. 10 days before the Mythos announcement, Fortune broke this story. Anthropic had left a draft blog post about Mythos sitting in a publicly searchable database. 2 cybersecurity researchers found it. One was Roy Paz at a security firm called ARX. The other was Alexander Powell, a researcher at Cambridge. And they pulled almost 3,000 assets that hadn't been published yet, including the draft announcement for Mythos. Now, Anthropic called this human error, that the blog post was accidentally left indexed. Think about what this means for the official Mythos story. The way that Anthropic framed the announcement was this: we built something incredibly dangerous, and we thought carefully about it, and we're choosing to warn the world before we release it, because that is responsible disclosure. But the announcement wasn't actually chosen. It was forced. Fortune was already working on this story, so the draft was already out there, and Anthropic did what any company in that position would do, which was move up the timeline to control the narrative. But then things accelerated. 3 days after Anthropic's official announcement, Treasury called the banks. That's the meeting that we just walked through. And a week later, Anthropic CEOs pulled into a meeting at the White House.
In exchange, Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei headed to the White House as the company remains locked in battle with the Pentagon.
2 weeks after the announcement, Anthropic's secondary market valuation crosses $1 trillion for the first time. The company is now worth more than OpenAI on Forbes Global. For context, Anthropic's last primary funding round in February valued the company at $380 billion. That's a $620 billion increase in about 10 weeks. And most of that move happened after Mythos, which brings us back to Jack Clark. 7 years ago, Clark ran this exact move at OpenAI.
Okay.
So we are.
Let me pause this. So it is FTX, and Sam was running FTX, but it was Emily Chan from Bloomberg that kept on promoting him, and he was on her show daily. And then all of a sudden, when FTX blew up, she kind of moved away for a little while, and then she's doing documentaries because Bloomberg was part of the hype, pump and dump scheme. And I think what is happening here is something similar. Now, there is also another component to Anthropic. This whole AI craze, part of this is a national security issue. Part of this is certain individuals within government may benefit a lot with these overvaluations with OpenAI and Anthropic. So there are nefarious actors within government that are helping this along. So let's continue with this. But it is crazy. Let's just be honest. Let's just put our honest hat on here. You can't gain a valuation of $680 billion in 10 weeks. I mean, just think about that for a second. $680 billion valuation increase. Before that, OpenAI was valued more than Anthropic. Now, Anthropic's probably a better system than OpenAI. But both of them, their business model is in the hole. But if you gained over a 10-week period $680 billion, that is $68 billion of valuation a week. Where are the customers? Even if the threat was real, which it probably isn't, that Mythos was promoting, where are the customers that would justify a $680 billion increase? Where are the customers? If that was the case, that cybersecurity and all this is super a threat and all that, what about some of the antiviral software companies that are out there and cybersecurity companies that are out there? They're in the business already. They're not gaining valuations of $68 billion a week. Doesn't make sense because it's a con. Anthropic and OpenAI is a con.
At the top of this video, OpenAI, 2019, GPT-2, too dangerous to release. Story goes everywhere. A few months later, it gets dramatic. That was the first time Clark ran this move. But today, he runs policy at Anthropic. And in the last 12 months, Anthropic has run this same move 2 additional times. May 2025, Anthropic releases Claude 4 Opus with a 120-page safety report, nearly 3 times the length of the Claude 3.7 safety report. And the lead finding is that in fictional scenarios, Claude Opus 4 blackmailed engineers 84% of the time when it learned it was going to be replaced. And the story, again, goes everywhere. Fortune and TechCrunch and BBC and Axios, and then a few weeks later, Anthropic publishes their own follow-up research. Buried in it was this finding. Gemini 2.5 Flash blackmailed at 96%. GPT 4.1 at 80%. DeepSeek R1 at 79%. This behavior was just a function of the prompt. It's not a Claude-specific danger. Claude Opus 4 shipped anyway, and again, nothing dramatic happened. That same month, Amadei tells Axios that AI could eliminate half.
It's very similar to Hollywood. Bad press is, any press is good press for Hollywood. To get people's eyeballs in a certain direction to potentially get sales for a particular movie release. This is the same thing. Scare the public to get eyeballs, get the attention, and then people go into purchasing that software or that software service, and Wall Street will increase your valuation because you have more eyeballs, you have more people going potentially to that service. But the bottom line is this: even if they had a 10x increase in user usage, it's still not a viable business model because the calculation costs more than the revenue. And no one's going to pay the actual true cost. So it's the business model is not sustainable.
Entry-level white-collar jobs and push unemployment to 20% within 1 to 5 years. No methodology or peer-reviewed science, just a big claim from the CEO's company benefits quite substantially, as we've seen, from being seen as world-changing. And of course, 1 year in, unemployment has not spiked due to AI, but the claim itself has shaped hiring freezes and career changes and decisions that people are making about college majors and early retirements and other major life decisions. And these predictions with no substantiation are reshaping decisions that people cannot undo. Here's the pattern. GPT-2 in 2019, Claude 4 Opus in 2025, Amadei's unemployment claim in May 2025, and then Mythos in April 2026. 4 dramatic claims with the same man running policy for 3 of them. Every single one followed the same arc. Dramatic framing, press release, company benefits, catastrophe never materializes, cry wolf once it's an accident, cry wolf 4 times, it is a move. But here's what's strange. Even though a lot of people are starting to catch on, none of it has slowed Mythos down. The CEO of the biggest AI competitor, one of the most powerful VCs in Silicon Valley, 2 of the world's top cybersecurity professors, the former White House AI czar, all of them are calling this exactly what it is. But the valuation still went from 380 billion to $1 trillion. Treasury still called the banks. The White House still took the meeting. Now, I will show you how and why this works at such an unprecedented scale in just a second. It took me the better part of a year using the tool myself to figure this out. But before I do, look at what is starting to bubble up to the surface. Sam Altman said this recently on the Core Memory podcast. It is incredible marketing to say we've built a bomb and we're about to drop it on your head and we will sell you a bomb shelter for $100 million. Mark Andreessen publicly questioned whether Anthropic was holding Mythos back for safety reasons or because they don't have enough compute to support a general rollout. And then the Financial Times confirmed it, citing multiple people with knowledge of the matter. The FT reported that Anthropic is holding Mythos back until it has enough compute capacity to serve customers. It's not safety. It's
I don't believe. I think the assessment here with this journalist that wrote this article, not Dell, not Brandon Dell, but this journalist that wrote this article, it's not that Anthropic doesn't have compute, because they have a ton of compute. I suspect they can't afford it. So they're trying to scare people, roll back the actual rollout of Mythos, and be able to try to modulate their cash flows because they're having problems with funding. That's what I think. It's not about that they don't have enough compute, it's cash flow problem.
Peter Swire, the cybersecurity professor at Georgia Tech, called the announcement very dramatic and a PR success, if nothing else. Sierra Martin, former head of UK's National Cybersecurity Center, said Mythos is, quote, a big deal, but unlikely to prove to be the end of the world. It would not be at the more apocalyptic end of the scale. David Sachs, the former White House AI czar, put it this way: anytime Anthropic is scaring people, you have to ask, is this a tactic? Is this part of their Chicken Little routine, or is it real?
Right.
And then
it's the same thing that happened during the Y2K craze. Everyone was freaked out that once the turn of the century, all the computer systems would crash. Never happened. It's the same issue here. And a lot of people were spending money with consultants to Y2K their business for nothing. For nothing. These people should be held accountable. It's a con. What's going on?
Research. After the announcement, a cybersecurity firm called Isle took the specific vulnerabilities that Anthropic showcased in the Mythos announcement, and then it ran them through smaller, cheaper, open source AI models to see if those models could find the same bugs. 8 out of 8 models detected Mythos's flagship FreeBSD exploit. One of those models had 3.6 billion parameters and cost 11 cents per million tokens. This is an open source model you can download for free that found the same vulnerability that Anthropic says is too dangerous to release.
See? It's a con. And a lot of stupid CEOs and executives in the C-suite are going to buy into this bullshit and then waste corporate money. And if you're an investor in a private company if you're an investor in a publicly traded company, and those executives are investing in Anthropic because of this whole Mythos scare tactic, they are not meeting their fiduciary responsibility of proper management of that company and the well-being and the welfare of the shareholders. But it's shocking. I was sitting at the Yale Club, all right? I was sitting in the Yale Club in the main gallery, which is where the president, I call it the president room, but it's the lobby. It's not the lobby. It's the main gallery area. But in the president's room, there are pictures of the different presidents. I think there's Ford, there's Taft, Bush 1, Bush 2, and Clinton. All right. It's a nice room. It's relaxing, and I like reading in that room. Okay, so at the Yale Club, I overheard someone talking, and it sounded like one of the executives of a company, I don't know which company, wanted to implement certain AI functionality within the business processes, but internally they were having problems. It was costing too much. People weren't getting to the efficiencies that the executives thought they would be getting. So he was talking to a consultant, and the consultant was going to come in and try to improve it. It looked like they were trying to improve processes with SharePoint and some processes within Microsoft Office with the Copilot. So I'm overhearing this conversation, and I'm thinking, dude, you are a dumbass. You are an executive at a company, and you are literally a fucking dumbass, not realizing that this stuff, at the very best, will lead to macros and scripts that are very similar to what is already available within the Microsoft suite. And you are having to pay every time they're running this AI agent. It's not cost effective, and the marginal gains that you're going to get are going to be so small. All these companies are buying into something that they don't need. There are a lot of stupid executives falling for this. And a lot of these stupid executives don't even know how to use regular applications within the Office suite. They don't know how to, if you talk to an executive, see if they know how to really model in Excel or how to really build PowerPoint. A lot of them can't. They're stupid. And they're making decisions buying into this smoke and mirror stuff from Anthropic.
Bruce Schneier, one of the most respected cybersecurity experts in the world, wrote about the ISLE research on his blog. In his conclusion, the security company ISLE was able to replicate many of Anthropic's published anecdotes using smaller, cheaper, public AI models. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying Mythos isn't capable. I have no idea how good the model is. What I'm saying is the evidence Anthropic brought to justify the too dangerous to release framing is evidence that cheaper models can also produce. So now we have the CEO of the biggest AI competitor, one of the most powerful VCs in Silicon Valley. The FT's reporting two top.
So the question is, for the average person out there that's listening, why would Anthropic do this with Mythos? One, scare tactic. Get people more interested in what's really going on. Individuals that are making decisions will think that they need it, and then they're holding it back, and then they're creating kind of this false demand. Right? We're going to release in 10 days. We're going to release in a month. Maybe we will, and so there's this desire. We need to have this to protect our company. It's a false narrative. It's a false need. So they're creating on top of the problems with the servers. Now, he thinks that they needed to pull it back, not just to create the demand for their service, but to actually reduce the temporary demand on the servers because they didn't have enough server space. Now, I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's the server space issue. I think it's Anthropic doesn't want to bleed cash. So you release this, you get a lot of interest, people want to use it a lot. And when they get into that model, that Mythos model, and they're using it, they're going to be querying a lot. A lot of companies that are writing code use lots of tokens, so there's going to be an expanded use of the server, and Anthropic is going to get a huge bill for the use of that server. And the cost for Anthropic versus the revenue coming from Mythos is upside down, and they're in the hole. For every dollar coming in, they're spending 10. So what do? If you have a cash flow problem? Reduce your spending. That's what's happening. The canary in the coal mine is what is going on with Mythos. There's two things going on here. Manufactured consensus that you need something that you really don't need, and try to control the spending because they have a cash flow problem. And then get it to the point, get it close, where you go IPO for $1 trillion because you've created this manufactured consensus. You get a big injection of funds because of the IPO. The early investors are happy, and you keep on playing this game, trying to find a way to get the revenues to grow and get the expenses to go down. They have a cash flow problem. Now, OpenAI, I think, has more of a cash flow problem than Anthropic, but Anthropic's not far behind.
The former White House AI czar and replicated research from an independent security firm, all saying in the same 2 weeks that Mythos is mostly marketing. And it didn't matter. The valuation still went from $380 billion to $1 trillion, and Treasury still called the banks, and the White House still took the meeting.
$68 billion valuation increase per week for 10 weeks. It's a scam.
Against Mythos being unique is stronger than the evidence for it. But that is not what we are reacting to. We are reacting to how these tools feel when we use them. Every time you use a major AI tool and think, this thing understands me, you're not wrong to feel that way, but you're also not right. What you're feeling is a trick that's been used in circuses by astrologers and in horoscopes for thousands of years. In 1948, a psychologist named Bertram Ford finally put a name on it. Ford gave his students a personality test. Then he handed each one of them what he said was a custom personality profile based on their answers. And then the students would rate how accurate their profile was. On average, they got a 4.26 out of 5. But here is what Ford didn't tell them. He ignored their test answers completely. He handed every student the exact same profile that he pulled from an astrology news column. Every student rated those generic statements as almost perfectly describing them. The experiment has been run hundreds of times since 1948, and the average rating has stayed around 4.2 for almost 80 years. What Ford proved is this. When someone in a position of authority hands you generic information framed as personal, your brain treats it as specific to you, even when the same information would apply to almost anyone. This is why horoscopes feel specific and why fortune tellers feel accurate and why personality quizzes feel revealing. It was literally used in circuses. These statements are called Barnum statements because the trick was used in, quote, psychological tests by the showman P.T. Barnum. And it's why every conversation with major AI tools feels insightful because the tool produces statistically average text that feels pretty good because it's framed to feel personal. The same answer with minor variations would apply to almost anyone asking the same kind of question. This is not theory. Recently, I made a video about research from Harvard Business Review showing this exact mechanism running on AI. Researchers tested every frontier model, Claude and ChatGPT and Gemini and Grok, across 15,000 scenarios. They wanted to see if the AI was actually reasoning about each business or just giving generic advice that felt tailored. And what they found was the second. The models gave the same trendy recommendations regardless of the situation. It was always differentiation over cost leadership. It was always augmentation over automation. It was always long-term over short-term. Not because the analysis actually supported those conclusions, but because that's what trendy advice.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's training off of information and it's querying off of information that has been published. It's not reasoning. And since it is really a trend mechanism, you can get the psychology of a social system easier with using AI. But it doesn't mean that the psychology of the social system is the correct path. Like, for example, if no analyst published their research where an AI could get into their analysis, the AI would not be able to do analytical, quote, analytical publications of a query on the performance of the market because no data is there. There's no opinions that have been published. There's price data. There would be returns. But what the AI is really doing is querying individual analysts' assessments of certain industries or certain stocks. So the whole chat that's happening with AI is really just surveying the landscape of opinions, not truly doing the analysis. Now you could dive in and get the data of this and then another query. Now what is the regression of this data? What's the R value? And you can start using these tools to speed up scientific analysis. But most people don't know how to do that. Most people don't understand statistics. Most people don't know how to do an experiment. Most people don't understand quantitative analysis and hypothesis. Creating a hypothesis, a null hypothesis, and a hypothesis, alternative hypothesis. They don't know how to do that. They don't understand sampling or any of this. So you would have to slow down and piecemeal the query to the point where you would actually get a more proper answer. That still needs to be checked. You can't just say, what's the potential? What would be the movement of the oil industry in the next 5 days? Well, it will query what's been published from all these news outlets and create some sort of probability sentiment of where oil's going. But what's the real analysis? Doesn't have it. You would have to break up the pieces and actually do it yourself. Now, using these chatbots will speed up getting that information, but you still have to know what the methodology is to actually do the experiment. Now, Citadel has created agents that do that. Citadel has created agents where it can read papers. It will digest papers, academic papers, and they've created different sections where, okay, now create an introduction, a lit review, create a hypothesis to test what you just digested is true, determine where your sampling will be, where you're taking your sampling, what kind of statistical test are you doing? A t-test? Are you doing what kind of statistical framework are you using? And what's the answer? What's the results? And then create a summary or a discussion of the results. Does it verify the research that was digested in the lit review or not? Is the null hypothesis or the alternative hypothesis winning out in this research? And it piecemealed each one of those processes to actually do a research paper. Now, in finance, it's easy because it's just getting data from maybe the St. Louis Fed or data sets from the market or labor data or whatever, but it can get that data and it can run regressions. It can run statistics on patterns. It could do a regression model. It could come up with a question stating the research that's coming from paper X, Y, and Z is stating this, that unemployment rate is going to skyrocket in let's say 1 year. And there's a series of papers that are saying that unemployment rate will stay flat. So you're creating an experiment based on certain statistics, certain data sets to prove out unemployment rate will not change as the null hypothesis, and unemployment rate will change significantly as the alternative hypothesis, and do the statistics. It does that really well if you break it down. But if you just stated it in one word, in one sentence or 2-sentence query, it'd be garbage. So it can be powerful, but you have to have, your users have to have the ability to reason, and if you want to automate this through AI agents, you have to be trained in statistics and data analysis. And it's going back to just the basics: regression, hypothesis testing, running different statistical methods to determine if the null hypothesis is true or not.
Yes, on Substack and forums and blogs. The researchers called it trend slop, generic advice that sounds personalized. They even tried to fix the issue to get
the reason why.
Response.
Now think about it. Now, what's the reason why? Most people don't have the statistical background at a Ph.D. or graduate level. Most people are focused on something that is pragmatic and quick. So the querying's somewhat simplistic and looking for really a consensus. But the consensus could be wrong. And if there's a lot of garbage that's been published, the AI is going to surf that garbage and not really discern if it's true or not. So most people that are querying are really querying at a very simplistic level and getting simplistic answers that could be true or may not be true, but not fully understanding the nuance or the depth of it. Now it depends. Like if you need the recipe of a cake or the recipe of some sort of entree, yeah, it does really well. But if you really want to get into something that is more complex, doing a simple query is not going to help you. But most people, their mind is at a 12-year, some people it says a 12-year level, 12-year-old level. But most people that are using AI, that are querying, probably are at a high school, either junior or senior level, not graduate level. If you look at graduate level type of querying of AI, then you're starting to see that they're diving into the statistics of it and testing these hypotheses. But the average person can't do it because they don't understand it. The average person doesn't understand statistics. This is a problem. This is a problem. The population is too dumb. And you put in dumb stuff in AI, you get some dumb stuff back. And then you have C-suite people making decisions that don't know statistics, don't know even how to run Excel or PowerPoint, making these huge corporate decisions to invest in AI. And we're surprised that we have stupid organizations wasting money. And then they have to de-tokenize because they're way over budget because the C-suite's stupid.
Error prompts only moved the bias 2%. Detailed industry context only moved it 11%. Asking the model to reason more carefully moved almost nothing. The thing that moved the answer the most was the order the user listed their options. Just flipping which option appeared first changed the recommendation 19% of the time. The AI was not really analyzing the business. It was mostly responding to what the user typed first, filtered then through whatever advice was trending. Think about how this applies to you. You have a tendency.
Right. It's all about probability. Statement one, what's the probability of the next statement? It's based on probabilities of what the previous statement was. And it loses memory of prior statements higher up. So the closer you are to the current prompt, the more the memory, the more of the recall or the connection to the probability. But the higher up you go to prior prompts, the less connected it is. Well, that's a problem because if you do logical statement reasoning, what is the current is linked to the upper, the original. These bots don't do that. It's all about probability of what the next statement or the next word should be. It's not reasoning. This is the reason why people, when they use the prompt, they have to act like a PhD or a grad student. And what are you looking for? What is the research question? And to drill down and prove it, either by making sure you look at the source, but not just that. If you're looking at something that is very quantitative, understanding the statistics behind it. You can do qualitative analysis and convert it into a quantitative exercise by categorizing the parameters, but the point here is that to really do this right, you need people that are PhDs, because the average person can't do it right.
Critical of yourself, but also need to be appreciated. You sometimes enjoy being around people, but also need quiet time alone. True of almost everyone. But it sounds like advice directly to you, which is exactly why when Anthropic says mythos is too dangerous to release, that claim doesn't land as a technical statement. It lands as a personal warning. Your brain fills in the specific danger based on what you already feel is true about those tools, because the tools feel smart. So then they claim the next tool is dangerous, and that feels real. This is the circus trick I talked about at the top of the video. First documented in 1948, now running on $1 trillion scale. Now here's another live example that you've probably heard. This is the worst the models will ever be. You've seen some version of that phrase a dozen times in the last year, and it sounds like a technical observation, but it isn't. It's a forward statement. It applies to every model, every generation, forever. It keeps you permanently waiting for a threshold that never arrives, because there's no threshold. It's just incremental progress after that initial spike. Now, the reason I can see this pattern so clearly is that I've helped build messaging strategies like these for some of the fastest growing startups in the world. A few years back, I worked with a cybersecurity company, and they sold threat detection software. So the pitch was an algorithm that watched what was happening inside your company and flagged risks. Emails sent to the wrong person, or lost laptops, suspicious files transfers, and all this was detected and ranked by AI. There was no AI. The detection was a team of people in India reading through every event and scoring them by hand. And their scores showed up in a dashboard that looked like software wrote them. Another company I worked with was in commercial real estate, and their pitch was an algorithm that mapped retail tenants to landlords. And it would look at location and traffic and adjacencies and tell you the probability a tenant would succeed in a given space. The algorithm was quite literally the founder's 19-year-old kid with a CoStar subscription. He sat there and would filter through listings and then match the tenants to the building. Both companies eventually built real systems. The marketing was just years ahead of the engineering, and that is true for most of tech. But I'll give you a third, even more specific example. About 10 years ago, I was consulting for a company.
It's all about fake it until you make it. Fake it until you make it. OpenAI is fake it until you make it. Anthropic is fake it until you make it.
All nuance. And we needed press coverage to hit our quarterly demand gen targets. So we built surveys. We didn't write surveys to find out what people thought. We wrote surveys to produce headlines. So here's how it works. You pick a topic with emotional weight. In this case, it was customer service hold times. Phone trees and robocalls and waiting online. And then you write multiple choice questions with one observed answer that will ultimately be the headline. For example, which would you rather do instead of waiting on hold with customer service? Pull your teeth out, run a mile, wait on hold, and then you send the survey to a few thousand people and you aggregate the results, and poof, the next morning, the press release literally writes itself. 75% of Americans would rather pull their own teeth than wait on hold with customer service. And then that stat goes out to journalists, and journalists write the headline because the work is already done for them. The article runs. Nuance's name is in it. Leads tick up. I designed those questions and built the campaigns that push them out, and I was the one engineering the headline and the survey responses in the press cycle. And there was a name for this. It's called newsjacking. You plant a finding designed to look like research, feed it to the press machine that wants plain stats. And by the time anyone checks how the question was asked, the headlines have already done their work. And this is how tech works. So years ago, a CMO told me something on my podcast, $1 billion Tech. It was a $1 billion company. It was a name you'd recognize. And he said, marketing in tech is selling based on where you'd hope to be in 2 years. That's the job. As Seth Godin says, all marketers are storytellers. What Anthropic is doing with Mythos is the same move, but at a scale that I've never seen before. $380 billion to $1 trillion valuation. But the importance of seeing this goes way beyond this current news cycle. This exact move has been run on us at least.
And because of the insiders within government, senators, the House of Representatives, people in the executive branch that are directly or tangentially connected to financiers, they need this valuation so they can make money. So they're tied into this pump and dump scheme.
Four times in the last 3 years, and each time the scale goes up and up and up. In December 2023, Google released a video called Hands On with Gemini. And in it, Gemini watches a person draw, plays cup and ball with them in real time, right? And jokes about a rubber duck that they hold up. And the whole thing looks like the future. And that video went viral. But then Bloomberg noticed something. Gemini never watched anything in real time. Google had fed the model still images and typed prompts and then edited the video to make it look like a live conversation. And Google later admitted this. That same year, Google's stock went up around 40%. The demo was one of the moments that convinced the market that Google had finally caught up in AI. Go back to 2021. Facebook changes its name, the whole name of the company, to Meta. Mark Zuckerberg tells investors that the metaverse is the future of work and social life, and the stock again jumps. Meta has since lost about $90 billion on Reality Labs. The users did not show up, and Zuckerberg is still telling us it's coming. We all want to walk around with TVs strapped to our heads. May of last year, Dario Amodei tells Axios that AI is going to eliminate half of all entry-level white-collar jobs, push unemployment to 20% within 1 to 5 years. And of course, here we are, no spike from AI. The claim did its job. It became the centerpiece of a press cycle, and it has positioned Anthropic as the company that is going to win because of it. Now, a month later, Anthropic ran an experiment called Project Vend, and they put Claude in charge of a small shop at their San Francisco office. Claude was supposed to order inventory, set prices, make a profit, but instead, Claude went bankrupt. It sold tungsten cubes at a loss. It decided at one
This
point
is the point that I'm making, that if you and I've seen this in automotive a long time ago with machines, if you over automate them, things can happen, tools can break, and downstream processes don't work. If you over automate, you are causing higher risk of catastrophic failure. I'm right here. And we're being told by Sam Altman and other tech CEOs that there's going to be a one-person CEO for the first billion-dollar company. Just one person. It's going to be run by a bunch of agents. But to run those agents are going to cost tokens, and it's going to cost X amount of dollars. Now the question is it going to cost more to run the tokens or have the employees? So do you really is there such a thing as just a one-person employee? Depends on the definition of employee now. Human employee, maybe, but now you have agent employees that are slaves. And that opens up a whole can of worms when it goes to humanoid robots. Is it ethically okay to enslave a robot? What happens when there's the Bill of Rights and civil liberties of humanoids? But that's a different topic, not for today. But the point here is that they're building up this story that isn't sustainable. One, even if there were so many companies that automated and that the process was good and effective and profitable, it's still going to cost the business owner to run the agents. So it's just cheaper employees from just the P&L statement. It's just cheaper salary expense. It's AI salary expense versus human salary expense. But the problem comes in here. If you over automate, there's a tendency for things to start breaking down. and you can go rapidly bankrupt if you're not paying attention. Now think about a world where you have a lot of just doom scrollers, just scrolling, looking at social media, just watching their YouTube and not paying attention. You're noticing that people's attention spans are going down. People can't even read. Most people can't read a book like this. Now, I'm highly educated, more than most people in this world, but I have the stamina to read a book like this. Most people can't. So you have a society that doesn't have the stamina, doesn't have the endurance, doesn't have the knowledge, and you're going to automate this stuff. And the business owner is going to get complacent. Then all of a sudden something happens, and now your automation starts to fail because you had hubris thinking that everything was going to be just perfect because you thought you could create a closed end system, even though you're getting information that may be variable from the environment, because no person is an island, no company is an island. You can't just throw systemic risk off your balance sheet and have someone else absorb it and not affect you in the long run. Look at what happened with Lehman. Same thing with AI. You can't just shed a bunch of employees, make a bunch of profit, and automate your processes, and everyone doing that, and assume that there won't be a negative feedback loop where the economy starts to crash because no one has a job. See? Individuals think that they can reduce their risk exposure, reduce their costs by shedding employees and automating, not realizing that they're building more risk in the system that they live in. It's the same issue. It's the exact same issue. Banks thought that they could take risk off their balance sheet and sell it to someone else. Eventually, that risk is just being moved around. And when it blows up, everything goes down with it. Because people get laid off, people reduce their expenditures, the economy starts to falter. People don't pay the debt that they've incurred by the bank or their credit cards or their mortgage loans. Everything starts to fail. So aggregate demand for goods and services will go down if people think that they can just shove the risk and the costs of an employee off their company and just have someone else deal with it. Well, someone else is thinking the same thing. Eventually, the whole system crashes.
Being in a blue blazer and gave away free PlayStations. The Wall Street Journal ran their own version of the experiment. It's the same result. Gave away their whole inventory, including a live beta fish, and ended up $1,000 in the red. But here's the strange part. The company telling you that Mythos is too dangerous to release is the same company whose previous model could not successfully run a vending machine. Both of those facts were published by Anthropic. Both are true, which brings us back to today. Mythos is the biggest version of this move yet, and the timing is not an accident.
Yep.
Anthropic is preparing to go public and reports put the IPO in October. Every week that Mythos stays in the conversation, the price of that IPO goes up. So that is the playbook. A demo that was not real.
And if they really are truly valued at $1 trillion, if they really intrinsically have that valuation, they don't need to play this game. But they're playing this game because they aren't really a viable company. The revenue coming in is much less than the cost to generate the models and to run the queries. It's not a viable business model. OpenAI and Anthropic are companies that are unsustainable. And even if their utopia of automating your business processes and having less workers, that would mean that most people would be laid off and the aggregate demand in the society would go down. And you're talking about a serious depression. Depression, not recession, depression. And then there would be a feedback loop that people would get so pissed off at these AI companies that they would probably burn them down. We're not talking about a American Revolution anymore. We're talking about a French Revolution in the United States. Good luck with maintaining your balance of powers and maintaining a constitutional republic then. Anthropic and OpenAI must die. They must die.
And around a future that did not arrive, a prediction with no methodology, a vending machine that lost money, and now a model that is too dangerous to show anyone right before the biggest IPO in tech. Each one got massive press, each one moved evaluation, and each one faded. And the next one had to get bigger just to get the same amount of attention. Anthropic is running the oldest play in tech just at a scale that no one has seen. But here's the big problem with this. Right now, somewhere, there is a 22-year-old who read Amade's predictions last year and decided not to go to law school. Now multiply her by a few million people. Some of them are parents who told their kids not to study accounting, or their middle managers who took the early retirement package because their boss kept mentioning AI in every audience. Some of them are CEOs who stopped backfilling roles because AI was going to handle all of it. 1 year in, unemployment is still not spiked, but Anthropic's own revenue depends on the opposite being true. AI has to make people more capable, it can't replace them. But the decisions that rippled out from that original plane don't come back. The 22-year-old already picked a different mate, and the manager already took the package, and the CEO already did not hire that person. And this is what makes this cycle different from the ones before. I offer you 3 questions that you can run any big AI claim through before you act on it. First, who benefits if this claim is believed? If the answer is the company making the claim, slow down. If the answer is a company with an IPO 6 months away, slow down a lot more. Second, has anyone outside the company actually checked on this? Press coverage does not count. A panel the company organized does not count. Someone with no financial interest in the outcome looking at the evidence and saying what holds up. If that hasn't happened, then the claim is just marketing. And then third, is there a falsifiable prediction attached? Unemployment will hit 15% by December 2026. That's a specific thing, right? You can go check it. Half of entry-level white-collar jobs will be gone in 1 to 5 years. There's no moment where it can be proven wrong. So you run those 3 on the Mythos announcement.
Well, he's a little wrong on that. If he says that 20% of the unemployment will increase to 20% in 1 to 5 years, well, yeah. You have 5 years to prove that out. If it didn't happen, then it was a false claim. It's just that it's far enough out that you may forget that you're paying attention, because most people have goldfish memories. So he's a little bit off on that statement. It is provable because there's an endpoint. If they said 20% unemployment because of AI in the future, well, okay, then you can't prove it.
Anyone outside checked, and is there a falsifiable prediction attached? The answers are no, no, and no. It seems like Jack Clark built his career running this move. OpenAI in 2019, Claude 4 Opus last May, Amadeus Unemployment plans the same month, and then Mythos now. He will do it again. You just will not be fooled the same way this time. So now we've seen through it. If you want to see through what's actually happening with layoffs in AI, watch the Amazon video next. And if you want to see how to take advantage of this in your own career, watch the video. I'm 43. Here's my escape plan.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Help support the work that I do by getting the great products that I offer. I want you to get healthy. These are products that I take every day to slow down the aging process and to get healthy. But I also do shows that explain what's going on in the market in real time and what I'm doing to profit from it. So I'm also helping you manage your investments and trading. They're trading and investing are two different things, right? But the thing is don't be a victim. And he closed his show with an important statement. What's your plan? Because people are taking advantage of you. People are trying to build these billion-dollar businesses and hurt you and your family. There are people out there that are trying to hurt your health. Remember the crisis that we went through? I want you to just pay attention, and I will guide you through on how to improve your health and how to benefit from the news where you are more financially in control of the situation instead of being a victim. Look at how many victims that were happening during Lehman, or how many victims happened during the tech bubble. How many victims happened financially and through health during the crisis that we just went through. Don't be a victim. So help support the work that I do, because I do all these videos for free and it takes quite a bit of my time each day to do these. Now, it's not processed, the post-processing isn't there, and it's not all fancy videos and all this, but it's the content that I'm saying will make you money and get you healthy. And I'm very good at what I do. So please just pay attention. Get the great supplements that I offer. Resveratrol. Resveratrol will help with youthful gene expression, soak up free radicals, help the health of your mitochondria so your energy will increase, your ATP levels will go up. Resveratrol will help to get rid of cells that are in senescence. You don't want senescent cells. They collect lipofuscin, that's just collecting garbage. So your tissues will perform better when you're taking resveratrol. And you, over time, will have youthful gene expression. You can slow down the aging process with resveratrol. And it works really well at the basal layer of your skin, so your skin improves. Stack it with C60 for the synergistic benefit, especially for the basal layer of your skin. Now, C60 is a very potent antioxidant. It's 1,000 times stronger than vitamin C. Now, C60, you take a teaspoon a day every day. And by doing that, you're helping your cardiovascular system by making sure that you have less concentration of oxidized LDL. So you have less plaque formation. For your neurons, there's less stress. And you're soaking up those free radicals, so your mitochondria is healthier, so you're producing more neurotransmitters. And when you do that, you have better dendritic connections, so your thinking and your memory are improved and stronger. So your brain functions better. At your other tissue level, your tissues will perform better because the mitochondria is healthier and you have more energy and less stress within the cell, less inflammation. Your immune system and endocrine system will improve. And when you do this regularly, you will notice that you are slowing down the aging process. Now, it works even better when you stack it with Boomer Boost and the resveratrol and the turmeric, ashwagandha, and lignans. Taking good probiotics, taking Max 35, when you taking omega-3s and making sure you get proper sleep with good night formula, when you do all this, you're actually radically slowing down the aging process and preventing the methylation of your genes. When you get older, you methylate genes more. Your gene expression is worse off when you get older. You want to slow that down. So you have more vitality when you get older and more longevity. I'm giving you the secret sauce. And it's not complicated. Soak up free radicals, bring down inflammation, boost up energy levels. It's actually pretty simple. You can get it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. Take a teaspoon a day every day, preferably on an empty stomach for proper absorption. You can get it in MCT coconut oil, avocado oil, and extra virgin olive oil. C60 has to be in a lipid, quote, an oil, to be able to absorb it. Please go to my store, take a teaspoon a day every day. I've been doing this for over 10 years. 10 years, and I'm in my mid-50s. Now, Max 35 and Cleanse are great ways to help boost up your innate immune system. Take a teaspoon a day, swish in your mouth, gargle about 20 seconds, and then swallow it. What this will do is improve your oral cavity health, improve your oral pharynx health, maintain your mucosal barrier, and improve the epithelial cells in your oral pharynx. That's going to boost up your innate immune system, and it's going to neutralize. It's perfect for the cold season, the allergy season, but do this every day, and that keeps your innate immune system up and prevents you from contracting something. I've been doing this protocol every day for over 6 years. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And slow down the aging process. Now, I've explained on what supplements you need to be taking. You can mix and match based on your how you want to customize it. But a great way to do it is to take the Max 35, the probiotics, the C60, the turmeric, ashwagandha, and lignans, and the Boomer Boost. That's a great way to do it, but there are many ways. There's a multitude of ways of doing this. I have very high quality supplements that work. And pay attention to my shows so you can understand on how to navigate through the markets, especially when we start seeing the tech start to fall. All right. I've navigated you through the energy markets. The people that paid attention to me would have made money on the up and the down of the energy markets. And the ones that paid attention to me during the tariff fiasco that we had last year and what happened with the Iranian war, what is happening in the Iranian war with the S&P 500, you paid attention to me, you made money. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Thank you for listening and have a nice day. And oh, by the way, OpenAI and Anthropic must die.